Hello, welcome to Time of Death. I'm Ris.
And I'm Dee.
And welcome if you're new here. Just a brief forewarning. I'm ill right now.
I'm ill.
If you can't tell. And I was a major slacker. All I did was sleep today. And Dee came in clutch with a case, even though it's supposed to be my turn.
It is very chaotic in the Ris household. You can probably hear our mom in the back.
I bought this for you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
A beautiful
It's a
fan.
beautiful fan
Thank
for
you.
our fans.
Thank you, Mom.
We finally have fans. Anyways, back to our podcast. Yes, my poor little Ris is ill, so she's preserving her voice as much as she can. So I will be presenting today. So bear with me. It was a little short notice, but luckily, I always have something up my sleeve.
She does.
So bear with us, even though I just posted my email on Instagram. I'm not tech savvy. If someone wants to manage our Instagram for us, let me know, because I have not posted in like a month. But we got such a freaking cute message on Instagram. I just want to give her a shout out because I thought that was so adorable. So let me go to my... See, I'm navigating. Whitney, she just reached out to say how... I showed you the message, how much she enjoyed the podcast, and that meant so much to us. So I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Whitney. That was
Thanks,
so sweet.
Whitney. We love
really
you,
appreciate
Whitney.
We love you, Whitney.
And actually, on this topic, while we're here, I want to also give a special shout out to two of our little birthday ladies that we celebrated last weekend.
Yeah, we have Danton and Raimi.
And Ring, she's like the cutest thing that's on this planet.
We just met Raimi this past weekend, and it was her 28th birthday and Danton's 30th. And so happy birthday, and we loved meeting you, Raimi.
Raimi, you are so freaking cute. I can't even stand it. Like, truly. Truly. So anyways, this is going to be a ride. We're a little chaotic today, so bear with us.
For those of you that are new here, we are a podcast run by two nurses, and we like to talk true crime, and we focus on cases that have a heavy medical influence or cases that feature a medical professional as the perpetrator or victim. So, Dee, take us away.
Aye, Captain.
I'm the captain of this ship.
So, as you know, my last case was John Meehan, Dirty John. So, hang tight for the latest season, Betty Broderick.
The latest season of what?
Of the Dirty John Netflix.
Oh, yes. I forgot that. It's kind of odd that they call it Dirty John, but it's about a different altogether case, right?
Yeah, it's a totally different case, just as renowned. However, this took place in the 1980s. So different era, but still involved a medical professional, even though he just graduated from medical school and then went on to law school. So he's like this hybrid MD, JD.
JD?
A justice degree. I said justice degree. But it's Juris Doctor. So 2 doctorate level degrees.
What did you major in?
Justice. I am justice. So, all right, getting into it. Betty Broderick was born Elizabeth Ann Biseglia, November 7th, 1947. She grew up in Bronxville, New York. She was the 3 of 6 children born to Marita.
She's the 3 of 6 children.
She was the 3rd of 6, born to Marita and Frank Biseglia. She actually went on to change her name after taking a French class. So she wanted to make it a little more français. You know what I'm saying?
Oui.
Her parents owned a successful plastering business that they shared with some of their relatives. Her mom was Irish American and her father was Italian American. So, who else do you know that has that combo?
Oh, us.
Us. We are half Irish, half Italian.
Half Irish, half Italian.
Italian. So, the Biseglias were super strict. No surprise. And Betty went on to say that it was almost that she was trained to be a housewife since the day that she was born. There was like very clear expectations. She was going to meet a nice Catholic boy, have Catholic kids, get married, have Catholic kids, and then go on and have grandkids.
Catholic grandkids.
Catholic grandkids. And that she would be expected to support her husband, like, in any endeavor that he might do, like, unconditionally.
Okay.
She said that a lot of her friends in school were raised with that same mindset to be housewives. And because of their very similar mindsets and similar upbringings, that was the status quo. Mm-hmm. So Betty went on to graduate from Maria Regina High School in Hartsdale, New York, 1965. That same year, she met her future husband, Dan Broderick III. They met at a dance at Notre Dame, which is in Indiana. Dan was also from a very large Catholic family. He was Irish, and he was the oldest son. His family had a very similar attitude and outlook that the Biseglias did. At that time they met, he was 21 years old, and he was in medical school. And Betty was only 17, pursuing her degree at College of St. Mary's. She graduated from the College of Mount St. Vincent's with her degree in early childhood education and a minor in English. So she had a very strong background in academia as well. You know, and at that time, even her chosen major to major in early childhood education, it was still geared towards child rearing. So after they met, Dan was enamored with Betty. She went on to say that Dan never once wavered from his goal of making me his wife. He would wait, he would do, and he would say whatever was necessary, even agreeing with me when he didn't, and doing things I wanted to do when he didn't. That is, until he had me. Nobody ever used the terms obsessive-compulsive or stalker about Dan Broderick back then, but that's what he was. So, enamored. They went on to get married April 12, 1969 at the Immaculate Conception Church in Tuckahoe, New York. Betty and Dan went on their honeymoon, had a great time, and they came back pregnant with their first daughter, Kim. The couple went on to have 4 more kids. Their daughter Lee, son Daniel, son Rhett, and then they also had a baby that unfortunately passed away shortly after she gave birth to him, that they did not have the opportunity to name. Dan completed his medical degree. He's done with medicine. He then decided unanimously.
I don't think that's right.
No. He then decided that he was going... He then decided that he was going to law school, and nobody was going to stop him. Stop him. And of course, he was going to go to Harvard Law School, which is the top law school in the country at that time. I don't know if it still is.
Ambitious.
He wanted to practice medical malpractice as a lawyer. He said it would be better hours, less work. He's tired of being on call. And instead of being rich, they will be rich.
Rich, not only rich, but rich.
So during that time, he was in med school and law school. Betty was the provider of their family. She sold Tupperware, she sold Avon products, she used her teaching degree, she did whatever she could. And the family also took out a lot of loans to help support them. So after he graduates from law school, Dan is hired by a law firm in San Diego, California. So the family is uprooted and moves to La Jolla, California. Betty continued to work part-time, selling her Tupperware and her Avon products, while also raising their kids. In the fall of 1982, Dan is doing great. And when I say Dan was doing great, Betty was also doing great because they were a joint team. They were married. Now, this is a very clear distinction I want to make here because down the line, this becomes a point of contention. In the fall of 1982, Dan goes on to hire Dutch-American Linda Kolkenna, who was a former Delta Airlines flight attendant. She is super cute, super pretty. They actually look a lot alike. They're both these beautiful blonde bombshells. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Linda Kolkenna, his new legal assistant, is much younger than Betty. Mm. A year later, in 1983, Betty is very suspicious that Dan is messing around with Linda. And Dan adamantly denies it. However, in February 1985, Dan moves out despite Betty begging and pleading him not to go. Through a lot of difficult and trying situations, Betty ends up living in a home that is just not fit for her to be raising children in. At least that's what she believed. In the Netflix documentary, I don't know what exactly the crux was in real life, but in that setting, there was rats in the house that prompted Betty to drop her kids off at their father Dan's house. And then she went off to go visit her parents.
Okay.
So after she dropped her kids off, Dan kept full custody of these kids. And Betty is distraught. She was the primary caregiver when they were married together, and it was a big adjustment to get used to the fact that Dan was now taking care of the kids primarily.
So when Dan left, he just, was it out of the blue?
He was having an ongoing affair with Linda Kolkenna, and he claimed that Betty was not stable. Betty had the emotional maturity of a child. So it sounded like things had been strained for quite some time, and that the affair really was what just pushed it over the edge and prompted him leaving. As their affair progressed, Dan was very infatuated with Linda Kolkenna. Once he moved out, him and Linda started shacking it up together. And once Dan got her kids, Betty's children, Dan and Linda Kolkenna, were all living under one roof. And Betty was all by herself. Betty went on to claim that Dan confessed to her that he had been having an ongoing affair with Linda Kolkenna. And because of that confession, divorce loomed over their heads and ensued.
So, it's so tragic because Betty didn't do anything. And, Dan is out here having his affair and he's kind of calling the shots here.
It's really sad what happens. Super sad. You're right. He was calling the shots. It's exactly how you would put it.
That is exactly how I put it.
That is exactly how you would put it. So at this time, like you said, Dan is living his best life, calling the shots. He is very renowned as a JDMD. All he has to do to settle a case is call. People don't want the smoke. So at this time, while they're divorcing, he becomes president of the San Diego Bar Association, which is a big deal. So Betty went on to say that him being so prominent in the community made it very difficult for her to find a lawyer who was willing to represent her best interests in their divorce. Yeah. Nobody wanted to get on Dan Broderick's bad side. And because of this, she was at a distinct disadvantage. Betty also claimed that Dan used his legal influence and know-how to win sole custody of their kids, sell their house, even though she didn't want to, and cheat her out of the rightful share of their income. Not his, theirs. Mm-hmm. So the divorce ends up being finalized in 1989. And Betty really just went off the rails at this point. All of her power is taken away. And I'm not doing justice to show how manipulative Dan was of the legal system. He had Betty arrested. He had her fined for calling his voicemail and using like cuss words. He would deduct money from like her monthly checks that he was giving the spousal support, and did not let her see her kids. Like, I really felt badly for Betty. Like, it's very clear that she was being toyed around with, like tossed around like a toy.
What a cruel man.
It was cruel. And this is the mother of his children. Like, you can have like as much beef with someone that you want, but there has to be respect for that individual and what they sacrificed.
Yeah.
He did not want to pay her a penny.
Or even just them as a human being.
As a human, exactly. You're 100% right. So Betty left hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating when I say hundreds, of messages on the Broderick answering machine. At one point, Linda Kilkenna antagonizes Betty by leaving like, "Oh, hey, we got back from the sun, blah, 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 leave a message, blah." And of course she's going to go off. Like, that's antagonistic. And the judge says, take the girlfriend off the voicemail. Like, of course. But it's all very calculated and very antagonistic. So Betty went on to ignore so many restraining orders that forbade her from coming on the Broderick family residence. She did not care. She spray painted. She broke stuff.
My God.
She did not care. You gotta watch it. It's so good. There was no stopping Betty. There was no stopping Betty Broderick. She did not give a F. She said, F this horse. No. F you and the horse you rode in on, Dan Broderick. Mm-hmm. She was, I have to give it to her. But also, just throwing it out there, if someone is doing these things, usually they're escalating. If they have object aggression, usually that amps up to people aggression.
That's true.
And you know what? You can take out your frustration in, hitting a punching bag, but it doesn't usually release the anger. It just a lot of times gets you more frustrated. But I don't know. There's an apt analogy that it's like a snake eating its own tail. Mm-hmm. I think what it really comes down to is looking at, why am I so upset? Doing some really in-depth root cause analysis on yourself. Like, why am I feeling like this? Why am I upset? What can I do to help myself feel better? What can I do to fix this? This all really comes to a head when Betty takes her car and smashes the car against the front door of the Broderick home.
Oh, Betty.
But her kids were home at this time, so that was not a good look. I mean, it's not a good look in general, but especially when your kids are home. So April 22nd, 1989, a mere matter of months once their divorce is finalized, Linda Kilkenna and Dan Broderick marry. And Betty is pissed. Betty claims that Linda was intentionally antagonistic to her, sending her like newspaper articles about Dan and Linda's relationship, like their marriage announcement, sending her facial creams and slimming treatment ads. So I was like, Linda Kilkenna, you really are messing with the wrong lady. This lady just rammed a freaking car through your front door. Why are you antagonizing her? Not only that, you were sleeping with her husband the entire time that you were employed by him. Like, take a chill pill.
And all this pressure, someone's gonna pop.
And Linda was aware that she was messing with the wrong one because she asked Dan to wear a bulletproof vest at their wedding. And I'm like, so you have enough insight to say, hey, probably not a great idea to piss off Betty and antagonize Betty, but then you're sending her all these things in the mail. So the reason that they made that comment about the bulletproof vest is the fact that Betty had bought a Smith & Wesson revolver.
Oh, God.
And they're like, what? She has a gun? She's allowed to have a gun? Like, I was, like, floored because she had been arrested a couple times at this point. So, she was allowed to keep it for whatever reason. November 5th, 1989, 2 days before Betty's 42nd birthday, Betty Broderick drives to Dan and Linda's house at 1041 Cypress Ave in San Diego, California. She used a key she lifted from her daughter previously and went into the house while the couple was asleep. Both of her boys were elsewhere. Neither of the girls were in the house, so she creeps up the stairs, goes into their bedroom, shoots and kills them both. The murders occurred officially at 5:30 a.m. 2 bullets hit Linda in the head and chest, where she died instantaneously. 1 bullet hits Dan in the chest as he was reaching for the phone. 1 of the bullets hit the wall, and 1 hit a nightstand. Apparently, Dan did not die instantly like Linda, and they exchanged words.
Oh, my.
After she shot him, and she went to the other side of the bed and ripped out the phone so that he would not be able to call 911.
Oh, my God, Betty.
She threw it in the hallway and left.
You know, at first I didn't know this was the direction until she started, having some violent tendencies. But when you first started the case, I did not think that Betty would be the killer in this.
Gotta keep you guys on your toes.
Yeah.
So Betty calls multiple people frantically, telling them what she did. Goes to her daughter Lee's apartment, where she meets with Lee and her boyfriend. Betty talks to them and decides to turn herself in to the police. And while doing that, she never denied that she pulled the trigger, killing Linda Kilkenna and Dan Broderick. She went on to explain that she never planned to kill Dan and Linda, and that her crime was not premeditated. She had been startled by Linda Kilkenna screaming, "Call the police!" and instantly, without thinking, reacted and fired the gun.
I'm sorry, Betty, but you just had bought a gun, number 1. And number 2, what are you doing in the middle of the night in their house?
So she
With a gun.
She claims that her plan was to take the gun and kill herself in front of Dan and Linda, which is plausible.
I guess.
It's plausible. She had been tortured beyond that point. Everything's taken away from her that she could possibly care about. So I could see that happening.
I could see her killing both of them and then killing herself, potentially.
But she didn't.
But she didn't.
She said there was
She
no
survived.
bullets left.
Okay.
So she's obviously charged. And Linda and Dan's bodies are buried together at the Greenwood Memorial Park in San Diego, California, where they reside together today. So, criminal defense attorney Jack Early represented Betty at her trial. Carrie Wells was the prosecutor for the state of California. Broderick claimed her whole defense was centered around the fact that she was a battered wife, driven over the edge by years of psychological, physical, and mental abuse at the hands of Dan Broderick. The prosecution argued that Broderick was a cold-blooded murderer who planned and schemed to kill her ex-husband, and there was no stretch of the imagination that she had been a battered woman. That was simply not correct. So, forensic psychiatrist and criminologist Dr. Park Dietz claimed that Betty was histrionic and had narcissistic personality disorder. So, these personality disorders are flaws within an individual's personality. You cannot diagnose a person with a personality disorder after age 18 because up until that point, your personality is still forming.
Wait, you can't diagnose someone with a personality disorder?
Nope, before they're 18, you can't.
Really?
Yep.
I had no idea about that.
So, narcissistic personality disorder is marked by self-absorption and an intrinsic lack of empathy, which I think is very interesting in this case because this was someone whose identity revolved around being a mother, yet she had no empathy for her children and what they might have been going through the divorce and then her robbing them of their father.
Yeah.
Now, histrionic personality disorder is something where, again, everything kind of centers around them. They tend to be dressed very vividly. They're attention-seeking.
What exactly is histrionic?
Histrionic, yes.
Personality disorder. Can you give us more info about that?
Yeah. So, histrionic personality disorder is basically someone that's very dramatic, extroverted. They can be super flirtatious. Again, they want the attention. They like the drama. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say this is something that's universal. These are just things that would indicate, these are like hallmarks of the disorder. Early childhood events, much like her upbringing, would influence her personality, which is why, again, it's not diagnosed. Any personality is not diagnosed till someone is 18. It's unstable emotions, distorted self-image, and again, they just want to be noticed. Mm-hmm. So that with narcissistic personality disorder, that's a combo. I think it was the perfect storm. I think that she was a battered woman. Just because someone has these personality disorders does not mean that they are more likely to be violent. I think that maybe she has these traits, but that doesn't make her a killer. That's not why she would have killed. I think that in combination with what she went through could have been the perfect opportunity for something to happen the way that it did.
Very insightful.
I don't know about that, but I threw a little something.
A little spice in there.
Little spice. So, multiple mental health professionals have diagnosed Broderick with these personality disorders. Mm-hmm. The consensus is that she has them.
Okay.
So, Broderick's first trial, the reason I said trials earlier, was that the jury was hung. 2 jurors said that they were not going to charge her with homicide, that this was obviously manslaughter, that there was no intent behind their action. What it really comes down to is murder. A murder charge is something that's premeditated. You go in with the intent, versus manslaughter, which is not premeditated. It is the unintentional killing under duress, so they're under emotional duress or in the heat of the moment. So that's really what the difference is between the two, because I didn't know. So a mistrial was declared by the judge, and Betty was retried 1 year later with the same defense attorney that she had, Mr. Jack Early, and Ms. Carrie Wells, the prosecutor. So it's basically a replay. They're doing the same thing. In the first trial, she the prosecution does not include what happened in the bedroom, which was a huge misstep. The second time, she learned from her mistake, and she made sure to address that with Betty. The jury returned a verdict of 2 counts of second-degree murder.
Okay.
With these charges, Betty Broderick, is sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 15 years to life, plus 2 additional years for illegal use of a firearm, which was the maximum that she could be charged or sentenced with that charge.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? I think it was premeditated. Because number one, she just bought a gun. And she goes there in the middle of the night. And then I don't buy her saying that she was going to kill herself in front of them.
Well, we'll get to discuss that in just a moment. Since she was charged, she has been incarcerated. Actually, since she committed the murders, she's been incarcerated. And she's still serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. In 2010, her first request for parole was denied because she did not show remorse and she did not acknowledge any wrongdoing. Mm-hmm. Red flag number 1. 1001. She was denied parole again in 2011 and again in 2017. She will not be eligible for parole until January 2032. Oh. And she'll be 84 years old. So, my hot take on this is not, did she go in with intent or not? Was this a heat of the moment thing or not? My hot take is that, yes, the actions are very tragic. Daniel Broderick and Linda Kilkenna never should have been killed. Mm-mm. That's very sad. But ultimately, this case is not about premeditation or not. It's about the systematic failures that this society has shown time and time again of failure to address mental health and domestic abuse. Instead of vilifying her, society should use this case as a catalyst for conversations about the complexities of marital conflict, recognizing domestic violence or domestic abuse, and better support for mental health.
I agree that there needs to be reform, but I do think she needs to be held accountable for what she did.
Yes, and I think she would have with manslaughter. I think that Betty Broderick was a victim in her own right by the legal system. And this is my hot take. I know I'm probably going to get flamed for this, but I think that with any type of abuse, we should be trying to protect people. And I think that this was a failure on the legal system's part because this person is a lawyer. The power dynamic alone is just crazy. And, Betty obviously should be accountable for her actions. I'm not saying that. But I think that we use this as a way to really look and see, that there are inequities within the legal system as well.
Yeah. I agree with that part. Because she was, basically she was tormented by
her ex-husband.
Dan and what was the wife's name?
Linda Kilkenna. That's like branded into my head.
Yeah, Kilkenna. I do like that last name.
I know I do too. That's the problem.
So she was obviously tormented by the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really not treated fairly in the legal system. But yeah, I do definitely think she's still responsible for what she's done and she deserves to be in jail. Yeah, this is a crappy case. And, I feel like it just was like a pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm. That's a very apt description, Ris. Mm. It really was a pressure cooker. The Broderick cooker. All right. Wrap it up.
All right, all you cool little babies. Okay, guys, the time is 1900. That's 7 p.m. for those of you who do not use military time. We are wrapping it up here. Just a little cute FYI. We have 98 followers. And Dee and I are going to throw a party when we hit 100 followers.
So tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your brother, tell your friends, tell your boyfriend.
Friends.
Tell everybody. Look, and our mom so cutely brought in these little butterfly fans today.
So cute.
Once we hit 100, we're going to throw a party and y'all are invited. Party at Ris's house.
Yeah. Well, everyone, we'll see you next week. I will actually do a case next week.
Whoa,
If I don't get sick again.
So, what is the expression? Stop the press. Start the presses.
Notify the press.
Notify the press.
Tell them I'm coming.
She's coming. She's doing it. You're going to do 2 in a row?
Yeah, I think so.
She just had looked so heartbroken when I said that. She's
Well,
like,
we
"Oh,
got to get
pow,
back
pow."
on our track because I like having my even numbers.
I like having my odd. We're
Yeah.
such a good pair.
We really are. So I'll do 2 in a row.
All right.
All right.
Let's call it a night.
Good night, or good day or good night. Whatever you're listening to this.
Whatever time it is, whatever dimension you're in. Mm-hmm. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.